Hello, so I'm going to do a quick start on vue.js. It's a library that I've been learning recently, and it's been gaining quite a bit of popularity. So hopefully this will help anyone that wants to give it a try. Um, I'm going to show you how to get started on CodePen.io, which is a quick prototyping website where you can just type your JS and HTML, CSS, and all in the browser and see it update live without having to install any tools on your computer. And then after that, we'll go into how to move to a local editing environment without CodePen. So Vue.js, here is their website. Let's start from the very beginning. And you can go ahead and go to the Get Started documentation, which is pretty good actually. Now, they actually already have a JS fiddle set up, and what I did not like about this was that it was hard to access the console. So in many of the quick starts, they mention that you can actually go to the console and update certain properties and see how that affects the UI, but it's a little annoying to do in JS Fiddle. So this is why I decided to go to CodePen.io, because CodePen has a nice console tab here. So we can copy the first example in the Vue.js introduction. And the reason it's not working is because we did not add the Vue.js library. So let's add the library. And now it works. So now we can try what the documentation tells us by changing the app.message in the console. And as you can see, the message updated automatically. So we can continue to play around with this. So let's suppose we wanted to turn this into a list instead. And we want to add a secondary message. Now if we look into the console, we get a warning from Vue that submessage is not defined. So if you read the documentation, all of your properties have to be defined. So let's define submessage. Now the warning goes away and Vue.js is happy. We can now set submessage. And now this is updated. So we can continue to play around with the HTML a bit. Maybe this is where we want the message. Maybe this is where we want the sub message. And we don't want the rest of this. And let's set this to something. And there you have it. So now let's try to get this working locally. Before getting it working locally, I want to show you one more feature in CodePen.io, which is the Babel transpiler is an option already set. You just have to add the preprocessor and set it to Babel. Now you can use ES 2015 syntax. And if we try to modify app in here, we get an error because we declared it constant. However, if we set app here, we can still modify it because the browser is still running non-ES 2015 version. So now let's try to get this working locally. Going to open a terminal so I can easily create files. So I'm going to create a demo.html file. I like to use Vim, but you can use any text editor you want. And so I have an empty demo.html file. And first I want to get the Babel transpiler working. So the easiest way to do this is to use something called Babel standalone. And there's two ways you can do this. So if you Google for this, you'll go to the GitHub for Babel standalone, which is okay. But there's another way, which is if you go to babel.js. They have a website here and they have a setup option. And one of the options is in the browser. And most of this documentation is similar, except the CDN for some reason is different. Here they use Cloudflare, and here they use Unpackage. Let's go ahead and use this one. Going to open that. And for some reason, the minified version of Babel has a syntax error. I didn't really look into this, but here's an easy way to fix it, which is to not use the minified version. Now if we load it, it works. So now Babel is working, and we can clean this up and add vue.js. So let's first get rid of this code. You don't need that either. Now I need to add the vue.js library. And now we can start with adding our code. That we've already written. Now, if we did everything correctly, this should work, and it did. So, as you can see, we are running in ES 2015 JavaScript, and this is actually going to be really useful because as you get deeper into the Vue documentation, they're going to start using ES 2015 syntax, and if you're not up to speed there, it might be a little confusing on how to translate that back down to an older version of JavaScript.